So this is second Esdras chapter 13 verse 31. One shall undertake to fight against another, one city against another, one place against another, one people against another, and one realm against another. So this is about the World War III that's about to pop off. So right now you have one city against another. You have Moscow versus Kiev, right? And then a rumor of war of cities against city. We have Beijing versus Taiwan. We have Israel versus Damascus. You see me? Cities against cities. And one place against another. So you have Russia versus Ukraine, China versus Taiwan. You see me? Israel versus Syria, Iran versus Israel, and North Korea versus South Korea. You see me? One people against another, and one realm against another. Verse 32. And the time shall be when these things shall come to pass, and the sign shall happen which I shewed thee before. And then my son be declared, and then shall my son be declared, whom thou sawest as a man ascending. This talking about the Lord Yahushai, who some call Jesus. And when all the people hear his voice, the Lord Yahushai, so called Jesus, every man shall in their own land leave the battle they have one against another. And an innumerable multitude shall be gathered together, as thou sawest them, willing to come and to overcome him by fighting. But he shall stand upon the top of Mount Zion. Right? So what's this talking about? This is Joel chapter 3 verse 2. I will also gather all nations, and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land. So what we read in Esdras is another recap prophecy of all nations coming to Jehoshaphat. And what are these nations going to be doing before they come to Jehoshaphat, right? As Joel chapter 3 verse 2 says, I will also gather all nations, and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and will plead with them there for my people and my heritage, right? This is what am I going to be doing. Verse 2nd Esdras chapter 13 verse 33. And when all the people hear his voice, when they hear the Lord crack that sky, every man shall in their own land leave the battle they have one against another. And an innumerable multitude shall be gathered together, as thou sawest them, willing to come and overcome him by fighting. Right, so before the grand finale of the Valley of Jehoshaphat pop off, you're gonna have Russia versus Ukraine. You see it? Russia versus Ukraine. Right? One people fighting against another. You're gonna have hold on. You're gonna have China versus Taiwan. Rumors of wars and rumors of wars, right? That's a rumor that China might invade Taiwan starting tomorrow or today, after the Olympics, sometime after this Olympics, right? And then you have the Rocket Man Syria, the Rocket Man North Korea, right? But remember, say Joel chapter 3 verse 2. Cause Esdras is telling us that before the grand finale of Jehoshaphat, every man shall in their own land leave the battle they have once against another. So people are going to be fighting. It's going to be civil wars and wars against people in their own realms. You know, the Asian theater, the Middle East theater, the Eastern European theater. Right? So, watch it. Let's go back. I will also gather all nations. Joel chapter 3 now, verse 2. I will also gather all nations. I will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat. So God is already doing this right now, right? Watch it, watch it. So this is Djibouti, right? Djibouti. It's a land in Africa, near the Middle East, near Israel. I'd say about like 500 miles from Israel, right? You see it? Djibouti. Now, who has a military base right there? So, see it? The Washington Post. In strategic Djibouti, a microcosm of China's growing foothold in Africa, right? So above ground in this tiny but strategically located country, signs of Chinese presence are everywhere. Right? You see the Chinese BTR, them, the military APCs? You have a Chinese military base in Djibouti, right? That's the Middle East. Close to the valley of Jehoshaphat, right? Up there in Israel. By Israel, Jordan is the valley. Right? So you have China right there, so gathering. What's I will also gather all nations and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat. So I will also gather all nations, comma. So the Lord is gathering nations right now, right? Before he brings them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat. They're getting gathered right here already, right? So that's China right there, so, right? And then you have North Korea, right? So North Korea is gonna be warring against South Korea. That's a rumor. That's another rumor of wars and rumors, right? Behold, its rhetoric support for Assad's regime. North Korea has been credibly accused of providing military support to the Syrian armed forces, supplying ballistic missiles to Syria, and aiding the country's illicit chemical weapons program. While the extent of the North's military role in Syria is unclear, reports of North Korean military involvement in Syria have circulated since 2013. There is anecdotal evidence that DPRK, Democratic People's Republic of Korea, military advisors aided the Syrian Arab Army's May 2013 offensive on Al-Qusayr, which resulted in a decisive victory for Assad's forces. In 2013, Buran Gillian, the former president of the Syrian National Council, alleged that North Korean pilots were fighting in the Syrian Air Force. So you have North Korean man them in Syria right now. Right now. Right? Hold on. And North Korea is giving them ballistic missiles as well as... Watch it right here. In August 2020, a UN panel of experts report revealed that at least 800 North Korean military personnel and laborers arrived in Syria in the second half of 2019. So that's all we want out of that, right? That there's already Korean military man them in Syria, right? Okay? So you have China in Djibouti. You have North Korea in Syria, right? Watch it. This is from the Hal Turner radio show. Russia allows Iran aircraft loaded with arms to land at Russian base in Syria. And Iran already has Syrian bases. They already have military bases in Syria. But this Syrian base, the Khmeimim air base, is a Russian air base, and Russia's now allowing Iran to use them. Meaning Israel can't blow up Iranian nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles now that's in Syria because they're housing them in a Russian place right now. And Russia can't be touched by Israel, right? The Israeli Jewish man them. So what's going on? Why do we have Iran and Syria, Russia and Syria, right, in the Middle East? Why do we have not China and Djibouti, right? Why do we have North Korea in Syria, right? It's in the Bible. Joel chapter 3 verse 2. I will also gather all nations and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat. So right now, before he brings them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, he's gathering all nations. Because NATO is already in the Middle East, in Iraq. But the axis of the powers, the people that's coming against NATO and the US here, he's bringing them he's drawing the lines right now, telling them, yo, you can't fire right here, right now. You can't bomb this place no more, Israel, or else we are going to pop off something big, okay? So, watch it, one more time. I will also gather all nations, right? So he's going to gather all nations. I will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat. That's the second part. So what's going on in the first part right here? Hold on. Hold on. Second Ezra chapter 13, verse 31. And one shall undertake to fight against another, right? People against people. One city against another. So Moscow versus Kiev, Pyongyang versus Seoul, Beijing versus Taiwan. You see me? One city against another, one place against another. So Ukraine versus Russia, North Korea versus South Korea, China versus Taiwan. One people against another. Yeah, the Russian man them versus the Ukrainian man them, the South Korean man them versus the North Korean man them, the Chinese man them versus the Taiwan man them, right? One people against another and one realm against another. So you have the Eastern Europe versus the Western Europe, right? You have communist China versus democratic China. You see me? You have communism versus democracy. You have realms. You see me? Realms. Verse 32. And the time shall be when these things shall come to pass, and the signs shall happen, which I shewed thee before. And then my son, he's talking about Yahweh, so-called Jesus, be declared, whom thou sawest as a man ascending, right? And when all the people hear his voice, every man shall in their own land leave the battle they have once against another. So that means the China man them are gonna stop fighting in China versus Taiwan. The Russia man them are gonna start fighting in Russia versus Ukraine. The Korea man them will start fighting in North Korea versus South Korea. You see me? And an innumerable multitude shall be gathered together as thou sawest them, willing to come and to overcome him by fighting. But he shall stand upon the top of Mount Zion. You see me? And Zion shall come, the elect, you see me, and shall be shewed to all men, New Jerusalem, being prepared and builded, like as thou sawest the ill graven without hands. And this my son shall rebuke the wicked inventions of those nations, which for their wicked life are fallen into the tempest. They shall be destroyed with the wind, big bombs. You see me? So that's why it means in Joel chapter 3 verse 2, I will also gather all nations and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they scattered among the nations and parted my land. Okay, that's what I want to bring out, man, the World War III. So right now, the Lord, he's gathering the nations, right? But he didn't bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat just yet. He's gathering them around there, so. But he hasn't bringing them down into the valley yet. He's gathering, but he hasn't bring them into the valley yet. Okay.